When you look at the changes that have happened between the 60s and 70s, when we did not have school shootings and we did not have some of the horrible problems that we have today, and what's happened today, I talked about nutrition being very important, but there's another factor that changed that we've got to take a look at, and this is an unpleasant thing to take a look at, and that is the drugging of our children. When I started practicing in naturopathy, it was 1990. I have a younger son who was born in 1985, so he was 5 at the time. As he got into elementary school, I became aware of a push by the school to assess him for ADD and ADHD. In the practice where I was working, I also saw more and more families who were being asked to put their children on, at the time it was Ritalin, but of course these drugs have changed over the years. Massive numbers of our kids are being handled by prescribing a drug. These drugs they were Schedule III narcotics. Ritalin was. It's in the same class as cocaine. They changed it to a Schedule II so that they could get permission to prescribe it to kids. And you guys, these things are not good. At the time, I wondered to myself, what kind of situation are we breeding here? What are these kids going to be like in 10 years, in 20 years with these medications? So it's a very real problem that we have. Attention deficit disorder and ADHD, there's no clinical test for this. There's no blood test, there's no CT scan. This is based on someone's opinion about your child. My younger child was pushed to, be assessed for this. And thankfully, I had a colleague who was a psychologist, and I asked her to do the assessment instead of the school doing the assessment. And so I took him to a private person, and at the time he was into these little tiny Lego things. And this is the first grade. He can't really read very much at this point. But the teachers were like, he can't pay attention in school. So I took him to the psychologist. There was a wait. We had to sit in the waiting room for a while, and I had brought some of these Legos for him to keep himself amused, in case we had a wait. So he's sitting there on the floor, and he can't read, but he's observing the pictures, and he's constructing these big Lego things out of these tiny Legos. The psychologist walked out of the room. She looked at him. She looked at me. She said, "This child doesn't have ADD. He's perfectly concentrating on building this Lego set. There's nothing wrong with his concentration. There's something wrong with the way he's being taught or some other factor that's causing this disruption in school." So I say that to say, using a medication for a behavior problem doesn't really solve the problem. It's trying to mask a symptom, and there are always side effects. Now, beyond ADD and ADHD medications, now we come to the other types of psychiatric medications. We have antidepressants like SSRIs or other medications. I've seen young kids on antipsychotics. I had a child one time that was in the 3rd grade on an antipsychotic medication in the 3rd grade. Yes, he had behavior problems, but holy cow, doing this to a 3rd grader, unbelievable. So the CDC estimates that 7 million children between the ages of 3 and 17 are diagnosed as needing antidepressants. And from state to state, it varies how many of these kids are treated and are treated with medications. The states with the lowest rate of medication treatment, about 38% of them are treated, but there are states where as many as 81% of these children are given these medications. Again, when my younger son was in the 3rd grade himself, we had dodged the ADD, medicine for him. And we were working on nutrition. It makes a very big difference. Well, he had a little friend in the 3rd grade who had been diagnosed with ADD and had been medicated. So he was spending the night with this friend. I went to pick him up at the house, and I'm talking to the mom, and she was sort of proud of this ADD diagnosis. This is another thing that I've noticed, is that there seems to be a little bit of a status associated with some of these diagnoses for some people. Anyway, at that time, I gently said to her, I'm like, oh, well, what I do for a living, I am a naturopath, and there's so much that can be done with nutrition. What does he eat in the morning for breakfast? Oh, he eats a muffin. He eats like a sugary muffin. And I said, if you just change that breakfast to something with protein and a little bit of fat, something healthier, that could make a big difference. She said, oh, that's too much trouble. I just prefer to give him the medication. Oh my gosh, you guys, like seriously, what have we come to that we would rather take an easy way out of medicating a child than actually dealing with the issues that are causing the problem?